The shrines of Vel'thos had stood for 3,000 years. Not metaphorically, not culturally, literally. The physical structures, the obsidian towers, the carved ceremonial gates, the sacred enclosure at the center of the temple complex where the Vel'thari kept their most holy relic, had endured for 3,000 years without significant alteration, because the Vel'thari did not believe in changing things that worked, and the shrine had always worked. The sacred enclosure, in particular, had never once been breached. Until today. Highkeeper Kalen stood at the edge of the enclosure and looked at the open gate with the expression of a being who had dedicated 47 years of his life to one specific responsibility and was now watching that responsibility collapse in real time. The gate was open. The enclosure was empty. The Dravath was gone. "Sound the alarm," he said, very quietly. His assistant, a young acolyte whose name Kalen had not yet learned because she had only been assigned to the shrine 6 days ago, stared at the empty enclosure with her mouth open. "Sound the alarm," Kalen said again, with slightly more emphasis. She ran. The alarm, a deep, resonant tone produced by the largest bell ever cast on Vel'thos Prime, a bell that had not been rung in any living Vel'thari's memory, began to sound across the temple district. Kalen stared at the empty enclosure. 3,000 years. The Dravath had been in this shrine for 3,000 years. It had eaten 17 high keepers who made the mistake of entering the enclosure without proper ritual preparation. It had shattered the eastern gate once, in the reign of High Keeper Mordhaz, and the resulting structural damage had taken 60 years to repair. It had been the subject of 12 failed containment reviews, for serious theological debates about whether something that 8 high keepers could truly be considered sacred, and one very awkward diplomatic incident when a visiting Meridian delegate had asked, with genuine scientific curiosity, whether the Vel'thari had considered simply not keeping it. It was, by every metric available, the single most dangerous creature on Vel'thos Prime. And it was gone. Commander Soraya Voss of the Joint Colonial Safety Division received the emergency call 17 minutes after the alarm sounded. She was on Vel'thos Prime as part of a routine multi-species cooperative assessment, the kind of posting that was generally considered peaceful, administrative, and unlikely to produce anything worth writing a report about. She looked at the alert on her communicator. Critical containment breach. Vel'thos Prime Shrine District. Dravath entity at large. All personnel evacuate Temple District immediately. Lethal threat classification. Absolute. She looked at the alert for a long moment. Then she pulled up the Vel'thari cultural database on the Dravath, because in her experience, knowing what you were dealing with before you dealt with it was the difference between a report and a memorial. What she found did not improve her morning. The Dravath was, according to every xenobiological study ever conducted on it, all of which had been conducted from a considerable distance and through very thick, transparent steel, a predator of no determinable natural origin. 7 meters at the shoulder, covered in a biological armor plating that had deflected every projectile, energy weapon, and concentrated force that the Vel'thari had ever accidentally or intentionally directed at it. 6 limbs, the front 2 of which terminated in appendages that the xenobiological reports described as manipulative claws capable of exerting sufficient pressure to liquefy standard-grade durasteel. A neural architecture so complex that every attempt at behavioral prediction had resulted in the researchers concluding, professionally, that the Dravath did what the Dravath wanted, and the Vel'thari had simply been fortunate that what the Dravath apparently wanted, for 3,000 years, was to stay in its enclosure and occasionally eat a high keeper. Lethal threat classification, absolute was, Soraya felt, possibly an understatement. She was already moving toward the Temple District when the second alert came in. Update: Dravath located, Temple District Eastern Gardens. Approach with maximum caution. Lethal force authorized if necessary. She broke into a run. The Eastern Gardens of the Vel'thos Shrine Complex were famous throughout the sector. 3,000 years of careful cultivation. Flowers that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Trees that had been growing since before humans had discovered fire. Pools of water so still and clear they looked like holes cut through the ground into another sky. Soraya arrived at the garden perimeter to find 30 Vel'thari security officers standing in a loose semicircle at the garden's entrance, none of them moving, all of them staring at something inside with the focused, unblinking attention of people who had decided very firmly that they were not going any closer. She pushed through to the front. She looked into the garden. She stopped. The Dravath, 7 meters of ancient, armored, unkillable apex predator, the most sacred and dangerous creature on Velthos Prime, the thing that had eaten 17 high keepers and shattered gates and been the subject of 12 containment reviews, was lying in the Eastern Garden's central clearing with the posture of a very large cat that had found a patch of sunlight and decided the day was going well. On its back, sitting in the gap between two of its massive armor plates like it was the most natural seat in the galaxy, was a small human boy. He appeared to be approximately 9 years old. He was holding onto one of the Dravath's neck ridges with one hand, leaning forward and talking to the back of the creature's enormous head with the focused conversational energy of someone delivering important information to an attentive audience. And the thing is, the boy was saying, in the particular tone of a child explaining something they find genuinely fascinating, dinosaurs weren't actually cold-blooded, they think. Like, scientists changed their minds about it. They were probably more like birds. Which makes sense because birds are dinosaurs, actually. Did you know that? Birds are dinosaurs. The Dravath made a sound. Low, deep, resonant. A sound that had, in recorded Velthari history, preceded the eating of high keepers and the shattering of gates. The boy appeared to interpret this as engaged interest. Yeah, exactly. So technically, every time you see a pigeon, you're seeing a dinosaur. My dad says that's stupid, but I looked it up, and it's actually true. He patted the neck ridge he was holding. You're kind of like a dinosaur too, I think. Like, a really big one. What do you eat? The Dravath turned its head, slowly, with the careful deliberateness of a creature that was aware of its own size and choosing to move gently, and regarded the boy on its back with one enormous amber eye. The boy looked back at the eye with no fear whatsoever. You have really cool eyes, the boy said. The color is really good. My friend Zio has a lizard with kind of similar eyes, but obviously smaller. Do you like being pet? I didn't want to just pet you without asking, but you don't really talk, so I'm going to assume yes. He reached forward and scratched between two armor plates on the Dravath's neck with the confident technique of a child who had made friends with every animal he had ever encountered and saw no reason for this to be different. The Dravath made the sound again. Then it put its head back down on its forelimbs and closed its eyes. Soraya became aware that High Keeper Kalen was standing next to her. She had not noticed him arrive. She suspected he had been there for a while, because he had the look of someone who had been standing somewhere long enough that their legs had sent a message to their brain, and their brain had decided not to act on it. How long has the child been there? She said quietly. Our first alert on the Dravath's location came in 40 minutes ago, Kalen said, in the voice of a man speaking from a very great distance. The child was already there when security arrived. How did he get in? We don't know. How did he get on it? We really don't know. Soraya looked at the boy, who was now lying flat on the Dravath's back, looking up at the garden sky with his hands behind his head, apparently delivering a lecture on cloud formations to a sacred monster that was, by all available evidence, asleep. Is he one of the Colonial Survey Team's children? She asked. He is, said Kalen. His name is, he checked his communicator, Tomas. Age 9. His parents are xenobiologists with the survey team. They are currently, he paused. They are currently being kept at the perimeter by security because they have been trying to get into the garden, and security is concerned that any sudden movement or noise might provoke the Dravath. Yes. But the child has been in there for 40 minutes. Yes. Talking. Yes. About dinosaurs. Kalen looked at her with the expression of a man for whom the universe had ceased to make sense approximately 39 minutes ago and had not yet resumed. Among other topics, he said. He also covered, according to the officers who have been listening at the perimeter, the migratory habits of something called a monarch butterfly, a disagreement he is having with his father about screen time, the structural engineering of a type of human dwelling called a blanket fort, and his theory that vegetables taste better when they are hidden inside other food. Soraya said nothing. The Dravath, Kalen continued, has not attempted to eat him. I can see that. The Dravath has not attempted to eat anything in 40 minutes, which is, Kalen paused, consulting what appeared to be his entire professional understanding of the creature he had devoted his life to. not consistent with prior behavioral patterns when the Dravath has been outside the enclosure. What are the prior behavioral patterns? Eating things, said Kalen. Immediately. And then the alarm. Soraya watched the boy on the Dravath's back. Watched the Dravath's slow, steady breathing. Watched the way the creature's tail, thick as a tree trunk, had curled slightly, not in the posture the security reports described as pre-attack, but in a loose, almost lazy arc that reminded her, improbably, of a sleeping dog. I need to go in, she said. Commander, I strongly advise. Someone has to get the child out eventually, she said. And standing here hasn't made that happen. She handed Kalen her sidearm, her communicator, and her rank insignia, everything metal, everything that might make noise, and walked into the eastern garden. The Dravath heard her coming. She knew it heard her because one eye opened when she was 20 meters away, a slow, considering aperture, amber and vast, tracking her approach with the complete attention of something that missed nothing and decided everything. Soraya stopped, held very still, met the eye. This, she understood in the most fundamental possible way, was the moment. Everything after this moment would either be a story she told or a footnote in someone else's report. The boy sat up on the Dravath's back and looked at her. Hi, he said. Hi, said Soraya. Are you here to get me? Eventually, she said, not moving. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm great. He patted the Dravath's back. He's really nice. Soraya kept her eyes on the Dravath's eye. How do you know it's a he? The boy considered this with genuine seriousness. I don't actually. I just guessed. Is that rude? I have no idea, said Soraya honestly. The Dravath's eye moved from Soraya to the boy and back to Soraya. Something was happening behind that eye. Some calculation, some assessment, some process that 3,000 years of veil theory scholarship had never successfully mapped. Then the Dravath did something it had never, in 3,000 years of recorded observation, done in the presence of anyone outside its enclosure. It made the low sound again, but longer this time, and with a different resonance, a frequency that Soraya felt not as threat, but as something closer to a question. The boy seemed to understand it the same way. It's okay, he told the Dravath, with the easy confidence of a 9-year-old who had decided how things were going to go. She's nice. She's got a good face. He looked at Soraya. You have a good face, he informed her. Thank you, said Soraya. She walked forward slowly, steadily, watching the Dravath's eye track her. Stopping 2 meters from the creature's flank, close enough that she could see the individual textures of its armor plating, the old scars layered beneath the new growth, the extraordinary engineered complexity of something that had existed, largely unchanged, for longer than her species had been keeping records. Hey, said Tomas from his position on the creature's back. Can I ask you something? Sure, said Soraya. Is he going to have to go back in the box? Soraya looked at the boy, then at the Dravath, then at the boy again. I don't know, she said. It was the most honest answer she had. Tomas looked down at the Dravath's neck ridge. He was quiet for a moment in the way that children are quiet when they are thinking something they haven't decided whether to say yet. He doesn't like the box, Tomas said. I could tell when I went in. He made a gesture that somehow communicated going in circles, but sad. He seemed lonely. Soraya looked at the Dravath. The Dravath looked back at her. I'll see what I can do, she said. The official report that Soraya filed with the Joint Colonial Safety Division and the Veil Theory Council of High Keepers was 17 pages long and contained, in her professional opinion, the most extraordinary sentence she had ever written in an official document. The Dravath's behavioral shift appears to have been initiated and sustained by a 9-year-old human child who entered the enclosure through a gap in the ceremonial gate's lower hinge assembly, sat on the creature without prior authorization, and spent approximately 47 minutes talking to it about Earth wildlife until it fell asleep. The Council's response took 3 days. When it came, it was addressed jointly to Commander Soraya Voss and to one Tomas, age 9, human, Colonial Survey Team. The letter to Soraya requested her assistance in developing a new behavioral management framework for the Dravath, incorporating the apparently unprecedented discovery that the creature responded positively to sustained, calm, non-threatening vocal interaction. The letter to Tomas requested that he return to the Eastern Garden at his earliest convenience. The Dravath, according to the security officer stationed at the garden perimeter, had been sitting at the garden gate since the day after the incident, waiting. Kalen, in a footnote that was extremely out of character for a document of that formality, added, Highkeeper's personal observation, in 3,000 years, the Dravath has eaten 17 of my predecessors. It has never, to any recorded knowledge, waited for anyone. The human child has been here 6 days. I am beginning to revise my understanding of which species is the most dangerous one in this interaction.